Which is our Bookster segment. Bookster is a website for book lovers and much, much more. This week we have Murray Nossel with us, author of Powered by Storytelling. Welcome, Murray. How are you today?
Very well. Thanks for having me on this show.
I'm a little nervous to talk to you because you pay attention to how people communicate and listen or don't listen well.
Don't be nervous. Not necessary.
Can you tell our audience about your book?
Sure. This is a book which is intended for a business audience, really. And it's teaching people in business the skills of listening and storytelling. And when I talk about business here, I'm not only talking about people in corporations or, big firms. I'm also talking about the growing number of people in the United States who are independent business owners. So many people are starting their own businesses. And we all need to tell a story about who we are and what we do. So that's what my book is for.
Do you think the average person needs to listen more?
There is no question in my mind that the average person needs to listen more. We are so bombarded with information at the moment. There's so much coming at us, right? Well, the question is, who's listening? Someone has to be listening. So yes, I would say that paradoxically, storytelling starts with listening. You have to start by listening.
What do we gain from listening more?
What we gain is the ability to connect with people. Really, what's happening to me right now as I speak to you is that I want to connect with you. If I connect with you right now in this moment, I also know that I'm connecting with the audience out there. In order for me to do that, I need to listen to you. I need to listen to your questions carefully. I need to make contact with you. And what happens is that your listening then becomes a kind of channel for our communication. Between the two of us, we're listening to one another, and we're providing this kind of bowl into which our stories can be poured.
Growing up, my mom would say to me, "You're hearing me, but you're not listening to me." Do you think there's a difference?
Of course there's a difference, because hearing is really just an anatomical function, right? It's something that our ears do, for instance, and our brain does. But listening takes a certain amount of consciousness and a certain amount of intention. It's about letting something in. And we don't only listen to others, we also listen to ourselves.
And we also have something called selective listening, where we don't want to necessarily hear something or maybe get a criticism. We don't let it in.
Absolutely. And what's going on at the moment in our political scene in the United States, which is so interesting.
It is.
Is that how easier is it for us to listen to people on the opposite side, right? We tend to have really knee-jerk reactions to those who are in the opposing political view. I think it's really interesting to genuinely listen.
Well, you brought up something, I think that's emotional listening, because we're not listening with all of our senses. It's just a knee-jerk, a passionate response. And passion without purpose can actually could be damaging in a lot of ways.
Yes, and what's the purpose? If you're in business, right, your purpose is to have a successful enterprise and to connect with your customers, connect to your clients. That's your purpose. So you want to do everything possible to have that purpose realized. Surely what our purpose is as citizens of a country is to have our country be the best possible place for all its citizens to live in. Now, if that's our purpose, we're going to be driven to listen in a completely different way.
Also, men and women, I've noticed that there's a little bit of a gender disparity on how we listen. And I recently read a study that women tend to nod as a way to encourage someone to keep speaking, to pretty much give them a physical cue that they're engaged. But men take that cue as, well, she's kind of submissive. She's agreeing with everything I'm saying. So are there tips, because you work with a lot of businesses in the workplace, for people to communicate better, to listen to each other more effectively?
There are so many things we can do to improve communication in the workplace, and it starts with listening. So the first thing I'll say is that we men can really learn a lot from women.
Thank you.
In terms of how to listen. So that's the first thing. is like, firstly, pay attention to the fact that listening is not some kind of passive act. Listening is actually causing change in the communication. And the second thing is that we need to be able to identify what are the obstacles getting in the way of our ability to listen. And one of the greatest obstacles is judgment, and that connects to opinions, our own comments on what's going on while it's going on. So what I'm encouraging people to do and teaching them to do through the book is learn how to listen openly and without judgment.
It's very interesting. Now, you work with huge corporations like Twitter, like Disney. What do you usually cover when you're speaking with them?
Firstly, I want people to know that storytelling is not some kind of soft skill, okay? Storytelling is something that is hardwired into our brains. If you want to communicate a message, story is the most powerful way to do it. But a lot of people don't really know how to tell a story. So what I'm training people to do is to learn how to first listen and then how to tell stories, and to tell stories that are going to have an emotional impact. So I'm literally training people to do that.
Because that obviously is a tall order and takes a lot of time, what's one gem that is a takeaway for people to emotionally connect to another person or to an audience?
The first thing that you want to do when you're telling a story is go to the moments in your life which have been the most powerful, where you've learned the greatest lessons. That's what indicates to you where your stories live. And then build your story around that. What makes for a very powerful business story is when you communicate how you came up against an obstacle and then had to overcome that obstacle.
And that's what resonates with another person.
Yes, it resonates in our brains.
Do you have another book coming out?
Well, I have many books. I wrote a book. My first book was a memoir, and my agent said to me, that's going to be your second book. You've got to write your business book first. And I'm also working on a book about the stories of mothers.
Oh, well, what drew you to that, just out of curiosity?
My own mother's story. My mother lives in South Africa, and she and my father were carjacked, and my mother was able to talk the carjackers out of killing her and my father. And so I learned from that my mother had tremendous skills of communication, and also she put my father's life before her own. She said to these guys who were pointing guns at her, please don't hurt my husband. So what that demonstrated to me was my mother's tendency to put other people's safety and lives before her own. And I think that's really a quality that mothers have. And I'm really interested in exploring that by looking at mothers across the world.
Very, very interesting. Well, I can't wait to read that. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. All right, guys, that's the end of today's show. Before I go, I wanted to make a very quick announcement. I'm excited to announce I'm the new official host for Bold Life, so I'll be seeing you every Friday. Thanks so much for being here. Yay! Thanks so much for being here today. If you like the show, spread the word and share it with your friends. Make sure to like Bold TV on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and